Wow, guys, well, look at how far we've come. We are on the final classic map for map completion. This is part 22, not counting the cities, which I'm not quite sure how I'm actually going to number here. Today we're going to be looking at Frostgorge Sound, which is, in a sense, the final Shiver Peak map, certainly for vanilla and release. We're going to be getting map comp, talking about how this place translated through the two games, which there's some amazing trivia on, by the way. General memories, and many thanks to TechZoom for submitting the footage. Straight away, a big memory here for me. This place here, Coiled Watch. At one point in the game's history, there was a really big farm here to do with this meta event called Breaking the Ice. Now, one of the big shake-up patches for loot and economy that came shortly after the game's release was the introduction of a type of item called a champion bag, which meant that killing champions actually now meant something. I guess originally at release, ArenaNet reasoned that a slightly bumped up loot chance plus more experience, you know, because you think experience is going to matter, would justify the killing of champions. But the truth was, they were really useless elements of the game and just super tedious, super difficult to fight. Most people would ignore. So they did this patch where they added champion boxes that could guarantee you certain resources, gold, materials, I think karma even for a while. Is it karma in the game at the moment? Anyway, when they did this, it was kind of chaos for Guild Wars 2, because suddenly a ton of events you could scale up to get loads of champions to spawn and have people kill those champions for epic amounts of loot. Some of them got found really quickly and nerfed really quickly. One of the best ones in the game was here at Coiled Wars, back there at Coiled Watch. So I always remember running around there. Really, really nuts little farm that not everyone knew about. We've also got some interesting living world here to do with air, which is kind of a novelty at this point, I think, because while like Ritlock and Logan have had a lot to do in the living world, air for certain reasons has not. And it's kind of nice to think about hanging out with her here and some of those early stories with Bram that you actually got to interact with, and they added a little bit more reason to see this meta event. I remember those living world patches being really controversial because people thought that the devs were being lazy, like reusing elements of the open world, but I always saw it as a really positive, efficient use of repurposing areas that, frankly, most people were skipping through. I mean, like, let's look at TechZoom here, who I would say is extra efficient, but generally doing what players are motivated to do. Did he spend a ton of time in that meta event area? Did he really get familiar with it? No, because map completion doesn't require you to. So then the living world came along and kind of, you know, re-emphasized those areas, which I've always very much enjoyed. So the reason I called this kind of the final regular map at the start of this video is because this is the last map we will be doing Renown Hearts in. The devs resolved that for the final region of the game, that's Ore, Renown Hearts would not be there. It was all about the events, and that's actually kind of a reverse decision to what they do with the game now, where Renown Hearts went away for a while and then they decided they were worth something and kind of ended up re-implementing them. But yeah, so in Ore we won't find any. That means that the Orion maps are kind of like the city maps to complete, but just a little bit more challenging. For now, we can help Tactician Sebastian against the Sons of Svanir. So we do find the Pact here. Because this is quite a high-level map, suddenly they appear. And you think of the initial Pact campaign as dealing precisely with, like, the Elder Dragon threat and Zaitan. But the Pact did spread very far north, straight away up here. I guess because of the Jormag activity in the area, maybe. They even had their fingers in the meta event for the Fireheart Rise episode and stuff to do with the Flame Legion, which is kind of interesting. Later, they'll kind of say in Living World that the Pact is more specifically interested in Elder Dragons than any kind of domestic issues, which makes their existence in Fireheart Rise kind of strange. But here it makes sense. I mean, there's Jormag, there's a brilliant meta event. The third of the 3 big dragon meta events is on this map. This is the one that never had any kind of update, so nowadays feels a little worse. But yeah, is a definite place for the Pact to come to. And in fact, this was actually, in this region of the world, where the central transfer chamber was in Guild Wars 1. And that was a place deep underground that you cannot actually visit here in Guild Wars 2. The depths of Tyria, as a general region, are basically not available. But we are on the surface above it, if you're in a very precise area of this map. I'll talk about it when we get to it. And why that's important is because the central transfer chamber is where we first ever saw an Elder Dragon. That was where Primordus was asleep 250 years ago. And in fact, in Living World, they started a cool update chain when Primordus moved, and it began here, and you could actually kind of track his movements from the surface, which is very, very badass. So yeah, it makes sense that the Pact are around. Always enjoyable. I love this vista. This is one of those vistas where you could end up just running against a wall and wondering, how the hell do I get there? You deconstruct it and you realize there's this long, beautiful path that is only accessible from the back of that base. Either that or you use a sky scale, but I mean, I'm a bit of a broken record saying that all the time. Looks like we're going into the south sections now, so this overlaps with some of the Northern Shiver Peak maps from Guild Wars 1. So we're in a very high level place for Guild Wars 2 right now. Look, these things are level 74, these dredge. However, it's actually overlapping with pretty early game stuff for the original game. This is Boreless Pass with the mission, and the Iron Horse Mine is actually slightly to the north of us. So all the geography of this area has completely changed. The dredge have these massive mines here now. There's a lot of big inland lakes and seas. In fact, I would say that this is actually pretty much one of the biggest water maps for the game. I know we tend to think of like Sparkfly and Bloodtide and the Orient maps too. But there's a lot of underwater content that you can do here, and especially high-level underwater content, which is nice. That meant it was a really good place at launch for getting materials for legendary crafting. I remember I had a friend at launch who played an engineer, and all he was interested in, and this really does say something, was getting a legendary weapon. He really wanted the Predator. He wanted his engineer's legendary weapon. And he grinded his arse off on this map specifically, killing Barracuda for armored scales out in the waters. And what's really crazy about it, and I think says so much about Guild Wars 2's popularity and when players left and stuff, is this guy was super into the game, and the second he got the legendary, he quit. He just quit straight away. I've said many, many, many times that I believe that Guild Wars 2 basically had no meaningful endgame due to combat balance and concerns about the way they did the economy and distributed out dungeon tokens and all that kind of stuff. It had very little meaningful endgame, and they are very, 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 I don't want to say fortunate, because it was obviously a calculated decision, but it's very good that they added legendary weapons to the game, because without those, I can think of so many players and stories just like that, where people were playing for the legendary, and once they got it, they were out. Especially for Engineer, and I guess Elementalist too, to an extent, where you don't even get weapon swap. People felt even more disconnected from the rest of the stuff. They get their one weapon, and then they're out, you know. It doesn't surprise me this guy was going for the Predator, which is two-handed. In any case, these mines are amazing. I love exploring these. Really excited to see the footage unfold here. So here we've got a little bit of a heart to do with the Codan that, as you can see, is a little tricky to deal with. They have a weird, like, PvP territory, almost conquest style thing going on here, where you're meant to kick the dredge out. But again, because we're getting credit really for just killing the dredge, actually the idea of defending the flag stands feels a bit weird. It reminds me again of that wolf renown heart from way back earlier in the Norn areas, way earlier on the playlist. Feels like that was maybe a concept that just could have had a little bit more refinement and been used really well. But these areas are beautiful, and there's very little reason to come back to them. You see that we're in the range of a meta event here, abetting a revolution. There's a lot of stuff to do with the dredge, and like insurgent factions within the dredge that are trying to revolt from their masters. You can do all kinds of fun things here where you get into dredge mining suits and you carry cogs around. It feels a lot like one of the Guild Wars 2 dungeons, and I guess to an extent one of the Guild Wars 1 dungeons as well, that being the Sorry's Furnace / Sorry's Embrace. There's so much here in such a massive open hallway, but you can kind of complete the heart just down here in this ramp. Like this little area, you can do most of the stuff, and then you're out. I always thought about this map in terms of its metas, because I loved the Tequatl Rising rework so much, and I loved the Triple Trouble Worm so much. For a good 2, maybe 3 years, I fantasized about a similar world boss update. I was close to making a video on it so many times if it didn't feel so fan-fiction-y and stupid. But I fantasized for a long time about a big change to the Jormag meta event on this map with the dragon, we'll see, who is way up in the northeast corner. We are currently in the southwest corner, and I used to love about the idea of connecting both of these metas. Some of those comments that the devs made about the Shatterer pre-release, that you kind of had to like prep the map by doing all the metas while you were waiting for the big boss, and, you know, completing more events made things easier. I liked the idea of like linking this meta into the Jormag one, where you need to get the dredge on side, and they kind of build weapons for you, and it all kind of snowballs and flourishes out across the map until you're at the top right. I love that idea for so long. It's definitely not an update that we will ever see come to the game. They might do something with the Claw of Jormag fight, but you never know. The Claw of Jormag fight itself is pretty complicated and cool. I would wait until we're in the northeast corner to talk about it, but I doubt the meta will be up when we get there. It's a cool place that I've got a lot of memories of because of precursors. I don't know why exactly. Maybe because it was like high level content, but it was the Claw of Jormag meta event boss above all others that really got a reputation at launch for being a place that you could get prees. And that's not necessarily true. There were lots of places you could get prees, but people really, really liked the idea of that one meta. And it has some nice phases. You know, there's like 2 different areas you fight it in, and it's got, you know, the heat guns that you're supposed to protect yourself from the super cold with, and the bazookas to break his defensive wall and all that kind of stuff. With power creep has kind of undermined it, but all my memories, lifetime in Guild Wars 2, have been that I was always a little bit underwhelmed by that fight. Underwhelmed, I would say, in the same way that I'm underwhelmed by all open world fights, so it's not that it's necessarily worse. But yeah, I played that one a lot looking for prees, and then in later years, they've added new incentives to go back to it, mainly through precursor collections and all that kind of stuff. So looking over at TechZoon here, by the way, in the cave, the mine, I should say, he's actually doing this in a completely different way to me. I think this is the first time in the whole series. He's probably going to hate to hear me say this, but it's fine. I think this is the first time in the whole series that I could have beaten a heart more efficiently than him. I really do think staying in that little corridor near that ramp gives you more opportunities. But this is nice, you know, you run around, you convince people to join the cause, including these, was that some Scray he was talking to? And what you guys have to understand is this is a lot like that big room in Dredgehaunt. You know, the one that I hated so much and talked about being so miserable. There are these spiral staircases you can climb way up, and there's all these kind of walkways and gangways and things up there. It's beautiful. There's also, I think we're going to have to go into it as well, so you guys should be able to see, an immense tunnel filled with water, which I've always found really interesting. In Guild Wars 1, there is a story about how the Dredge managed to tunnel from the Shiver Peaks here all the way to the Echo-Vowed Forest in Cantha. The Dredge were actually able to do that, and that's why you find Dredge in Cantha, because of this gargantuan, unseen, you could never play in the tunnel or anything, it was only there in the lore, tunnel that connects these 2 regions. And then here in Frostgorge Sound, you're going to see this. We got the most epic Dredge mine in the whole game. This place is huge, and it's badass. I love every bit of it. It looks so good in here, especially for 2012. And in the biggest mine, you've got like this huge underwater shaft down there. Now, a lot of areas in Frostgorge are flooded now, but I've always liked the idea that's the start of the cave or something. Interestingly enough, in Season 3, we actually get to go to a place even slightly further north than this, in Bitterfrost Frontier, where again, the devs kind of have this really deep, watery tunnel with a metal grate at the bottom, suggesting that you could go and explore further down there. And again, I wonder if that's kind of them hinting, hey, this could be the big tunnel. I've never really thought about it that much with Bitterfrost, but you know, it's connected, it's nearby. I mean, I like the idea that it's all as one big system. And well, because Guild Wars 2's ambition has not really been to take us to the depths of Tyria at any point yet. We've not ever got to go down there and properly explore it. I would really love to one day, for whatever reason they can come up with. But look at this vista up here. This is pretty great, to be honest. And then we get the heart at the same time as well. We even had a little bit of that Dredgehaunt experience there, where we were in combat and couldn't get the vista. You'll notice, crucially this time, though, there's no goddamn, like, veteran oscillators and stuff. And the density of the dredge is much lower. I would expect, you know, I would probably be really happy with the game if the Dredgehaunt cave had this kind of enemy density, and this cave had the Dredgehaunt enemy density. Because, you know, we are late game now, so we should be getting these appropriate experiences. But look at all these ramps, right? Like, I feel like there's so much you could do with this. Like, look at the pipes. Look how well the environment has been constructed here. There's so many fun things to look at. There could totally be a part of the meta event that has people swim down here, kill some kind of boss, collect a resource, and then that's going to help you fight Jormag or something. You get this mine working or something, and eventually it will blow really hot steam out into other areas of the map, a bit like we saw maybe in Living World Season 1, and this weakens the claw of Jormag. There's so much that I get inspired by just in this area. And as always, I found myself getting really inspired when the devs make huge areas, but there's not really enough content to fill them out. Those fans on the wall look amazing, obviously, and they're really working with the shadow and the lighting's very well there. If you don't have your shadows on high or ultra, I don't think you'll see that too well. That's a novel effect, but I've had my fill of that effect anyway, because one of the fractals, the Dredge fractal, has a similar thing going on in a certain moment, so I don't feel like we've lost too much there. So leaving the mines, I realised we haven't shown Shama's map yet, so let's throw it up. And you'll see where we are now is actually a place in Guild Wars 1, a dwarven outpost called Crocs Hollow. This is where the Ballis Pass mission kind of came to its conclusion. And look at it now in Guild Wars 2, completely kind of ruined. I think there's an Easter egg or some extra little dialogue you can get there. But what exactly it is, it doesn't spring to my mind right now. Maybe it's just a minor chest. We also got this cool place here with the ice bridge that can actually break. So I talked a bit in Fireheart Rise about the idea of bridges being able to break and, you know, you need to defend them and stuff. I get the feeling they were going to do that more in this game. I mean, even Guild Wars 1 kind of had some of that stuff going on. But this is a good example of one of the only areas where you'll see it. So the Coden here on this sanctuary are trying to defend themselves from the dredge. There's actually a lot of really amazing lighting here. First, the snow comes down real thick, it's very beautiful. But when the siege is going as a part of these events, defending Blue Eyes Shining, and you stand in the right place, the sky gets really orange and fiery. It looks super apocalyptic. It makes the dredge seem really deadly. It's not a group event, though, and it's not a part of any meta, so in that way, it kind of takes away from the strength of the experience, but it is really cool, and I always think about it when I'm there, especially when I'm going for the Vista nearby that we saw earlier in the video. So, a little thing about these sanctuaries, if you guys don't know, the devs actually don't have many varieties of sanctuaries, but they scale them to different sizes. And so, what we're walking on here, in other places in the game, is shrunk down, like much, much, much smaller. This is the biggest one. All the pathways feel really natural and really huge. It's also my favorite sanctuary in the whole game. There's a couple of them here in Frostgorge. One of them, obviously, is a dungeon. And by the way, this is a great map for just reasons to come here. It's a dungeon entrance. It's got a brilliant world boss that people thought was great for prees and stuff. So loads of stuff happening here. But this is my favorite one, partly because of the lore. So you get to ask these guys about their, in my opinion, totally messed up worldview, where they consider themselves like the rightful judges and arbiters of balance in the world. And so, you know, they think that they have this like logical, concrete, black and white view of how things are, and you get to ask them about it, and they like quiz you whether you know what the Coden would like to do. And just in being quizzed, it kind of reveals all these ugly inconsistencies in their thought patterns. I have streamed this in the past, and I've encountered people who tell me, no, they are perfectly logical, everything makes complete sense. But I really, really don't believe that about the Coden. I think that they have a very flawed, biased, weird, and yes, inconsistent perception about the world. And they're potentially really threatening and dangerous just in their arrogance and their belief that, you know, they are the rightful judges and juries of everything that's going on. It's kind of scary. Obviously, they're allied with us as far as the Elder Dragons are the greatest threat to what they consider balance to be. So, I mean, we're unified on that front. But it is interesting thinking about a world where Guild Wars 2 is less about the Elder Dragons. What happens with the Coden there? I really do think we would go into a world where the races start falling into conflict more, and I think the Coden could easily become villains very, very quickly. And I love this place. There's so much lore. There's like little journals and things you can read that teach you so much about who these people are and how they work. If I could just snap my fingers and magically have Guild Wars 2 players start the game here, I think it's a really good heart to get them invested in the Coden and the area of the world. These should be the first Coden you ever interact with. But unfortunately, they're in quite a late game map. I suppose you could get here easily. There's kind of a weird thing. This is a very late game map, but it does connect, believe it or not, to a starter map. This connects to the Wayfarer Foothills. You go back early enough in the playlist, look when I'm near Cragstead, which has now kind of replaced the Guild Wars 1 Ascalon Foothills. You can see there's a portal there. There's a way to walk up, but what will happen is you'll suddenly be in a lot of danger. And the game does try to warn people about that. It happens many times as we've been exploring through this whole playlist. If you are too low of a level, there's an NPC standing around who say, hey, I will advise you to turn back. And you kind of get that here as well. But I don't recall any other level jump as significant as this in all of Guild Wars 2. Maybe if you're in the Brisbane Wildlands and you find yourself walking into some Season 2 maps, like Dry Top or the Silver Wastes, sure, that's going to be a big jump. Maybe if you're a super low-level character that somehow gets through the gate to Lake Doric from Divinity's Reach, that's a big level jump as well. But this one's like really substantial because you are kind of being naturally guided in Wayfarer to move north. And so then you're going to find a portal at the north. You might be inclined to go through it. As a new player, you might not even know what portals are yet, you know? So you wander in and you get your ass kicked. I actually think that serves the RPG for what it's worth. I think that good RPGs have moments where you realize you're weak, so that then later you can come back and find you have become strong. I think that's a very, very important balance that Guild Wars 2 completely fumbles. But in little moments like that with the portal, I suppose is right. So moving out into the waters here, Really excellent place. That trench down below is actually the place of a guild race, so I've spent a lot of time here before. This is actually the area where the Barracuda would be farmed, I think, or maybe it's slightly further north. I do think, as much as I don't really like the snow, as much as I like the sun and sand and stuff, and in theory the Blood-Tide Coast should be on top, I think this is my favourite watery expanse in the game. It feels so calm and sweet and just huge. I mean, this is a really big, wide open area with like ice above us. It's so good. By the way, this little area here, this POI in this village or Sippus, that is a Quaggan like giant building, obviously. There are many Quaggan villages around the game. However, that one is so big and it's quite a unique asset. It's like a giant Quaggan town hall. You can swim inside, and on top of it is like a tower, which is hollow. You can swim into the tower and find like this whole room in there that is super cool, except the devs actually have a missing texture on the inside of that. So when you are inside and you look at the walls, they are see-through and you can look out because only one side of the model is actually textured. The other side is empty, so you can just like look straight through it. It's one of the very rare examples of something like blatantly like not unfinished in the game. You know, you can talk about design and you can talk about crunch and stuff, but I think that Guild Wars 2 in general hits a very high bar of quality very consistently. It's rare to find stuff like that. It's rare to find like world holes and stuff. For a game this big, how few world holes there are is actually really impressive. They weren't so good about that in Guild Wars 1. And hell, most of the other MMOs that I've been trying this year, I've noticed there are world holes in abundance. So, you know, that's just an example of the level of polish that Guild Wars 2 really had and helped it stand out, I think, at launch. Anyway, yeah, those water areas are great. There's a whole thing about, like, a Quaggan Olympics, various hearts you can do, just lots you can swim around in. The trenches below filled with kelp. It goes on and on and on. So this is an amazing area. Here we are in a level 80 section. This is the level 80 part of the map, just for what it's worth. And you see these enemies are level 79. We're scaled to 80. He's one level lower than us. So we get a waypoint there called the Drakar waypoint. Drakar Lake is a place in Guild Wars 1. It's a very important place. It's the start of a lot of stories to do with Jormag and the Sons of Svanir and all that stuff. Brilliant if you play the expansion. But here's the thing. That Drakar waypoint we just got is nowhere near the real Drakar Lake. The real Drakar Lake is way further north than this. So I've always wondered why ArenaNet named that there. It just doesn't make any sense. Many years later, during Season 3, they altered the geography up here. This used to open up into an inland sea, and the world map art showed an inland sea here. But when Season 3 came around, the devs kind of decided they wanted a map immediately to the north of Frostgorge called Bitterfrost. And like most of that water like just vanished, and it's kind of weird and strange. There is a portal near us. I love finding the portals that connect to existing maps. There was actually, I remember this very clearly, the Bitterfrost Frontier release was one of the best releases they ever did in the whole game, in my opinion. And I remember before it came out, people noticed that this map had changed and the world map art had changed right around here. So it kind of tipped us off that we might be coming here a little bit early. And that was during Season 3, which was a very globe-hopping kind of season. You know, we'd been in the Maguma Jungle in Episode 1, and then we'd been to the Fire Island Chains, and then suddenly we were back here. So no one would have guessed except the fact that, yeah, the map did change here. In any case, yeah, so there's a portal there now. And now it's even weirder because the Icebreed Saga's out, and we can actually go back to Drakar Lake. And it's like a whole map, and it's being properly done and stuff, but the Drakar waypoint remains here, way down in the south. Very odd. One thing, as I record this video, I'm still really looking forward to, and hoping they do in the Bitterfrost, in the Icebreed Saga, is connect the Icebreed Saga via portal to Bitterfrost. Now that would be awesome. So we can actually travel through it from Holbrack, say, up through Wayfarer, into this map, up into Bitterfrost. So you've gone from vanilla content to Season 3, and then finally up into the Saga. That would be so cool if they made that. But so far, as I record, that's not happened. So another rather interesting thing is we just traveled further north than the Iron Horse mine. It's all water now. That was a full-on mine, dwarven mine in a mountainous region before. The devs just nuked it all now. It's all water. Maybe it's because of the activities of the dragons and, you know, icebergs being sheared and turned into water and it's flooded or whatever your justification is. But you can actually swim down, and there's some cool evidence of the old Iron Horse mine. I think we'll do a hero challenge there later. We're actually even further north than that now. And so why that's kind of cool and kind of special is that means as far as Guild Wars 1's original release in 2006, we've now gone further north than anywhere. The Iron Horse Mine was the furthest reach of the map, and now we're beyond even that in Guild Wars 2, which is cool. There is, of course, the fact that Eye of the North added a ton more regions even further up, but we're kind of in that weird middle ground. So, you might think that's a really arbitrary thing for me to mention in the commentary, but I have to really make it clear. One of my favorite things about playing the sequel was finally getting to explore those areas between the maps I could never do before in the original. And yes, it feels completely different now, and it's like you can only really get that sense if you're looking at some third-party map or whatever. But it still means something to me. I still like it. Here we get an alternate Coden Sanctuary. This one actually having fallen to the Ice Brood. There's actually a lot going on here that kind of connects the events that you're looking at to the dungeon. I kind of went through all of those in the main story LP, so I guess I won't worry about it. Also, wow, TechZoons still sees anomalies on this character. That's unbelievable. Did you guys just see that anomaly? That's only available if you stall a certain story post-release at a very certain time. I always kind of wish I did that because I'd love to have anomalies running around in all of my footage as I cover this game. So that's kind of cool. I wonder if you guys caught that too. That doesn't really have too much to do with this map. That vista, I think, by the way, is kind of a copy of the original trailer where we kind of pan through a sanctuary as well. I remember with that original trailer, you see that sanctuary, but I just thought it was Holbrak. And I also remember in the original trailer seeing a Coden, a white snowy polar bear, and thinking that it was a Norn. I had this really, and I was very captivated by that as well. I had this very, very exciting idea in my head that the Norn, here we go. So this is basically taking us into the Iron Horse Mine here, or what's left of it now that it's all flooded. Really, really nice little touch. See? And so this isn't meant to be dredge stuff. I guess this is meant to be old dwarven stuff or something like that. But yeah, I remember being really captivated by the idea, and the POI is even called Iron Horse Mines, that when you went bear form, you could customize it, you know, and some people could be polar bear form, and some people would be, you know, grizzly bear form, and maybe some people would choose to be like black bear form or whatever. I really liked that idea, and it seems so ludicrous now, because the way the game eventually went was that racial skills don't mean a goddamn thing. And if they do, they nerf them real quick. I mean, there was a while that bear form was vaguely useful in dungeons and stuff, but they get them nerfed out, and it's not a big part of playing a Norn character. I think that's such a shame. It's not what I thought this game was going to be. But there you have it. Slough Despond, more suffering Coden that are attempting to bring balance in their own way. We're really just getting a lot of stories here about people who are oppressed from the far north. If you guys don't know their story, they are not from here. They're from like way, way, way up and across distant Arctic ices. We don't really know their true like place of birth or where they came from. And they might even be like a progenitor race to the Norn, which is a really, really fascinating idea. So yeah, and now they've all kind of been pushed down south, and that's why we get to see so many of them here. Another nice moment where we get to swim real deep. The mass invis here is insanely useful. I love how well that's been done. And the distort combo as well. Those urchins are a pain because they're environmental objects. They're cool enemies. I like them because they're weird and they're different. And anything weird and different I really like. You know, it changes things up. But I think they're structures, so you can't crit them or condi them. And they're like half buried in the ground, so sometimes your attacks get obstructed. And there's 3 of them perfectly spread out, so you can't actually AoE them. Just crazy. Mosh Poi Poi here, location with quite a few cool Quaggan events. I really like the Quaggan up in these areas of the map. And in fact, a very recent update that allowed us to take a mount underwater requires you to visit that village and help the Quaggan out a little bit. There was actually a bit of a dialogue error in the game. I never mentioned this in my coverage, but the Mosh Poi Poi section of the underwater Skimmer quest, they mentioned that they want to help them defend from the Risen. And of course, there's no Risen here. That's one of the nice things about what ArenaNet did. They implemented an alternate level 80 map that isn't in ore, so you can experience stuff that's not Risen. Like I mentioned, I love the underwater areas here because they feel so calm and stuff. There's something beautiful and haunting and graceful about the Orient underwater areas as well. But they're all just Risen. It's just Risen everywhere. So this is like a huge breath of fresh air. And then suddenly that quest text kind of made an error and it said that there were Risen around, when really what it meant was Ice Brood. I wonder whether the devs originally liked the idea of having like Mount Maelstrom's volcano be level 80, so you kind of get a fire, or the Fireheart Rise to be level 80, so you kind of get that. But again, as I mentioned earlier in the playlist, their original perspectives with all of this was level 80 wasn't actually really meant to be that special. The whole game was meant to feel like Endgame, and to a certain degree, as far as we only look at the open world, that's kind of true, you know. There's nothing fundamentally different we're doing here just because we're now scaled at level 74 or whatever, right? In fact, this guy's level 80. Oh, so this is the level 80 zone. I guess top left is slightly lower than top right. Yeah, which would make sense because there's this meta event, Breaking the Claw of Jormag. I do like this event. One thing that always comes to my mind whenever I talk about the Claw of Jormag, and I always have to suppress it and not deliver any commentary about it because it's such a picky, stupid thing. But one thing that's always annoyed me about the community is people calling this guy just Jormag. Like, I get that we have a tendency to abbreviate things, especially in games where a lot of communication is text-based, and people don't like typing Y-O-U, they just want to type U, right? I get it. We try to, you know, reduce things and be as efficient as possible. But calling this guy just Jormag is not a good idea. I remember so many times early on, not so much anymore. I think especially with the Icebreed Saga and stuff, people know the difference now. But I genuinely remember many times people thinking this was an Elder Dragon that we were fighting. And, you know, that's kind of... I think if I was ArenaNet, I'd feel really smug about that. I think I'd be really happy. Because people did that for Toil as well. Before the game came out, it was like, oh, this game's about fighting Elder Dragons, and someone might watch some convention footage, and you're looking at, like, the Shatterer fight or the Toil fight, and they'd be like, whoa, the Elder Dragons look amazing. And those dragons appear in footage everywhere, you know, in all those early trailers. And it would be very easy to say, oh, those are the Elder Dragons. Because, like, the standard for MMOs and spectacle fights and stuff, it was already at a place where these things were so big and badass that, sure, that might be Elder. Only for ArenaNet to say, no, 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 the Elders are way, way crazier than this. Way bigger, blah, blah, blah. And to this day, it's still one of the most captivating and exciting things. So right up there, that waypoint is the most northerly waypoint in Guild Wars 2 launch. Obviously, a lot of the gathering resources and stuff now are getting high level. You can find ancient wood on this map. You can find orichalcum on this map. And I remember for a period of maybe like 4 or 5 months, very regularly coming up here and just staring at the mini-map, trying to find all the different nodes so that I could grab them. And then, you know, when a daily reset would come, you'd return here and you'd run, do this same thing. The other place that was quite useful, I think, was somewhat near the Drakar waypoint. Because there was this level 80 area, then there were some Orion places that you could go to, which will come up in the later episode of the playlist. And then there was the World vs. World Obsidian Sanctum jumping puzzle, which also had rich orichalcum up there, which was worth going for. Okay, so right now, here, this is the central transfer chamber. This is basically below our feet somewhere, super deep. It's not a dragon of ice. A dragon of fire. That was Primordus, and he could have moved and been doing stuff in the 250-year gap, but that's where we found him in Guild Wars 1. And then eventually in Guild Wars 2, they kind of added a bit of a quest chain here. If you go into that fort area, you can sort of trigger it with these elemental sprites, and you could sort of track the movement of the dragon underground. Really nice. The outpost up there as well had a lot of really difficult, rare ambient dialogue to capture, which was sort of important because it talked a lot about the boss battle in the area. It talked a lot about the Claw of Jormag. So that was a long process during the personal story LP to grab all of that. And thankfully, if you guys watch that, it's just edited in at the start of the video, so you don't have to do any of your own waiting. I've always loved this area as well, the Trionic Lattice. It's just a really nice idea of an icy labyrinth that you can kind of navigate through. There was a champion train here for many years where you'd kill a troll. But of much more fascination to me is this here, Yakkington's Toil. This place is amazing. So Yakkington is actually referring to a specific character that was associated with Nick the Traveler from Guild Wars 1, a feature, like a weekly feature where you could get extra loot. But what's really awesome about this area, look at this as we come over, Yak's Bend. So this is like Pyken Square or the Greenwich Courthouse in the Ascalon maps. This was a really early outpost. It was a place where you could start runs to Droknar's Forge. It was a place you would go to as a part of the main story before you headed to more missions. And listen to me, guys, this overlaps perfectly with Guild Wars 1, and it looks perfectly according to Guild Wars 1. Just like with those Ascalon areas like the Greenwich Courthouse. Where you might not recognize it is because in the original game it was tons of refugee camps here from the Ascalonians that were evacuating their nation. So there were all these tents and things. And in the first game, you couldn't jump and stuff, so there were like railings and things blocking you in. But the actual flow of the land, the hills and all that stuff, It is exactly equivalent. And up here, they also had an associated arena at Yak's Bend. Same thing. The arena is exactly in there. It's so good. And I've always loved this one, maybe even more than Greenwich Courthouse and stuff. I mean, that's a hard thing to top. But one element that I've loved here is that the place feels so different, even though it's still accurate, just because the temporary, like, fabricated shelters and stuff obviously have withered away over 250 years, but the land is the same. And it's especially nice to see that the Norn are there now, that it is still useful as a bit of a trade route, a bit of an outpost. The sense of what we considered an outpost to be in the original game is still there in the lore, even though mechanically it's not necessary in this game. And the devs knew what they were doing, because they put a trading post there. So yeah, there is a trading post on this map. I always think about how in Sparkfly Fen, there's banks, because you can use the Hylic thing. The Hylic crafting stations. And on this map, there's a trading post for this boss. If you were maybe grouping for this, if there was going to be a big rework for this, you'd always have a TP there, which would have been useful. But neither map had both resources. You'd have to, you know, spend gem store currency or whatever to be able to pop those. Nowadays, I think most active players have so many ways of spawning trading posts and stuff anyway, it would never matter. But for many years, it kind of did. So we've kind of done a really nice big loop here. We're right towards the end of the episode now. This is the Traveler's Vale. This was all explorable in the first game. Of course, it was flooded with Stone Summit. There's a nice jumping puzzle here. I've always liked the idea that this is the Dragon Tribe Gruul. You know, the Sons of Svanir, like, worship Dragon, and they look at Jormag as a great spirit of the wild and all that, and they're misguided. Well, the Gruul can be misguided in all the exact same ways. And it's nice to see that that's happening here. And I just like that comparison of, like, these dim-witted Norn are, like, on the same level doing the same thing as these Gruul to a certain extent. I also kind of just like them because all their nameplates, they're not just called Gruul. They're called Dragon Tribe Gruul. They don't do that elsewhere. You know, all the other Gruul, their nameplates are not preceded with the specific tribe that they have. You know, there's not Badazar Gruul running around in Ascalon. In the Plains of Ashford, I should say. But here we get Dragon Tribe ones. This was a good area for gathering as well. Look at all the plants and things that are on the mini-map up there. Really, really useful. And they have it, Safe Watch Vale, right in front of the jumping puzzle, actually, which has a cool, weird, unique variety of ooze and stuff. Fantastic map. So there you have it, guys. That is the first of the level 80 content. That is the entire map done now. Look at that. We even got Orichalcum for map comp. Good rewards. That's everything now, except the unholy, abominable raised lands of Ore. Starting with the Straits of Devastation, we have 3 episodes left of the playlist. I'll see you guys there.